So welcome to my panel. Thank you for coming. As you can see, we're going to be talking about Dragon Ball and its musical history. Just a little introduction. My name is Tyson. I go by Z Hallums on the internet. I've got my friend Marcelo here, who does lots of Faulkner Dragon Ball music type stuff, all rips music. And then I have my friend Olympia, who's been on the last few panels. Basically, what I've got up here is a amalgamation of people. What I would consider myself is a Japanese music fan. Kikuchi, Yamamoto, Sumitomo, Ultimate Battle.
Tokunaga?
No, not Tokunaga.
You don't like Don and Don again?
So, basically where I got started, I've always loved Dragon Ball, I've always been obsessed with music. Then they announced this thing, I don't know if you heard of it, it's called Super. And there was this old Japanese guy with a saxophone that was making music for it. I was like, whoa, this sounds cool. And so I just kind of fell down the deep hole. And like I said, I've got my friend Marcelo here. He is kind of the counterpoint to me. He has fallen deep into the hole of the English composers. I don't know if you guys remember back in the day when Dragon Ball Z was airing on Toonami. There was this guy with a mustache, and his name was Faulkner. And he had these guys that were working under him, and they made some cool rock music. He loves all that kind of stuff. And then lastly, the lovely Olympia, who pretty much has only read the manga, so she doesn't know much about either. I like to consider her a neutral party. So the idea here, we're going to go through and just look at anyone who has ever made music for the Dragon Ball anime, pretty much. Hopefully you'll learn what everyone worked on, what they sounded like, what their favorite flavor of ice cream was, etc., etc. So the first person we're going to look at is the absolute legend, Shunsuke Kikuchi. Look at him. That is such a cool picture. This madman, go to the next slide here, what did he do? Everything. You're when Goku met Bulma, and then we'll go to the next. You're when Oob got around and Dragon Ball Z ended. Everything in between those two pictures, he did in Japanese. Everything. He's a legend. Any of the movies that you saw, if you saw them in Japanese, he was the music for it. Even the JSAT special, Yoda Son Goku and His Friends Return, did the music for that. Everything that is Dragon Ball, he's the voice for it. I have no idea how he did all of it. So basically we're going to kind of take a look at some clips. A, because listening to music is fun. And B, because we can sort of kind of get an idea about what each of these people were about, what they sounded like, what they liked, what they didn't like. And one thing that you'll see kind of as we go through this, every single composer goes through this insane evolution through the course of their series, where they start one way and they end up a completely different way. So the first one we're going to look at here is a clip from early Dragon Ball. It's Piccolo Saga. You're going to see Piccolo's theme, pretty much, Demon King Piccolo. And what I want you to listen to here, not only the weird, Asian-sounding instruments, but also just kind of the general melody, how it sounds, and then we'll take a look at that again in a second. So we can go and play this.
7 for 1 wish. I like the sound of that.
It's marvelous.
The greatest prize of all, eternal youth. Just think, with eternal youth I can master time itself.
Well, Piccolo was an edgelord. Anyways. So one thing I'll note real quick, my beautiful friend Marcelo here has created these clips for me. Basically what I did is took the volume of the music and just doubled it so we can hear it better, so that's great. So you see there's these really weird Asian sounding instruments, and it's all grungy and funky. And if we'll go to the next clip here, as he goes along, just like I said, every composer just kind of evolves over time. But everything stays the same in the end. If you listen to the melody in particular in this one, I think you'll find it's pretty much just the melody to the last one, but it sounds very different because, I don't know, 8 months had passed in between these two clips, so let's listen to this real quick. between the two clips is it got distinctly less Asian sounding. Of course, you've still got some of the same instrumentation, but now we're hearing like violins and like these big percussion sections and all this sort of thing, and that's a trend you'll see. But one thing that Kikuchi in particular was big with was leitmotif, which the general idea is you have a melody and you continue to use the melody again to try to put a theme to it. You could also consider them character themes. Faulkner was big on that. And so you see that with the Piccolo clip where even though a year has passed and all of a sudden this sounds a little bit more Western, it's still Piccolo and it still sounds the same. So this next clip here, talking about, oh man, I love this man. So, despite any evolution, you can pull any cute, cool sounding clip from the beginning of Dragon Ball to the end, and it's all going to sound like this cute 80s moe anime. It's like, you know, you could just like picture this music like, I don't know, two cute high school girls like, I don't know, hanging out by the locker room, and it is just the most charming thing ever. You'll see lots of very delicate instruments that kind of ride the line between Eastern and Western, and it's just kind of the most charming thing ever. So let's listen to this real quick.
Goku. Where's my dad?
He's sitting by the locker room. So there's that. Yeah, there's not much to say about that. His soft music is so soft and cute, and I just want to cuddle with it. So this next clip here. So Dragon Ball is over. It's time for Dragon Ball Z, and all of a sudden, so you know, like the Western movies where you know the wind's blowing, the cowboys are sitting with their guns and all this. Kikuchi goes through this weird, I don't know, maybe he was just like super into American stuff, but he goes through this phase where he starts to adapt these incredibly Western techniques, instrumentation, just some of the general like chord structure, everything just kind of undergoes this massive change. And if you compare, I don't know, like the last 3 clips that we listened to what you're about to see, you're gonna realize, wow, that's not okay. This is all right. There's like a shootout scene. So let's take a listen to this.
You've always been like this, ever since the day I first met you. Always ready to meet the next challenge, even if it's bigger than you are. So we meet at last. We have been expecting you, Kakarot. We were beginning to think you wouldn't show. Hopefully now things will get more interesting around here.
So you see what I mean, right? Like, wow, that's different. I mean, the change is immense, but oh man, I love that track so much. It's like top 5.
It's from the Broly movie, yeah?
It is. It is. The original scene was Goku is approaching Broly. Everyone else is like dead or something, and he's just like in Western style, like slowly walking up to Broly with this like confident face, even though he's about to get his face kicked in, and like this music's playing, and it's just. I mean, to be fair, Dragon Ball is very Western, especially some of the later stuff. The long stare-offs, crazy dialogue. I mean, it makes sense, but you can see over time this change occurs. And so if we'll go to the next one, We go from Western to full-blown, just Western cartoon, and it is amazing. And just play the clip, please, because this is one of my favorite tracks of all time. So, that's pretty much Kikuchi in a nutshell. One thing I'll note, I don't know if you guys noticed, at the bottom right I've got the names of the tracks. Kikuchi tracks don't really have names because guess what? He made like almost 1,000 of them. And he could not name all of them. I mean, there's more reason to that, but I mean, literally they're just numbered because there are so many over the course of the years and years that he did Dragon Ball. So now we've pretty much wrapped up Kikuchi. I'm going to see if these two have any thoughts because they come from different backgrounds than I, and then we will move along.
Just being someone who sort of grew up with the traditional, localized Western, more rock and roll heavy Dragon Ball Z. I remember initially when like the Orange Bricks came out, that was my first real introduction to like the 5.1 surround mix where they had the Japanese original Kikuchi score and the English dialogue. And at first I didn't particularly care for it, but I've definitely grown to love it over time, especially after I watched through Dragon Ball, and then I watched Dragon Ball Z with the Japanese version, and it's classic and timeless in its own way. Especially, I'm particularly fond of the Saiyan saga, where there's so many leitmotifs of like the same melody, and it feels like, if you said that Dragon Ball Z felt like a Western, the Saiyan saga was like the good, the bad, and the ugly musically, in terms of the Kikuchi score. So I'm very fond of Japanese score.
Yeah, I also love the Japanese score. A lot of people consider it to be the definite score. Obviously, that's subject to a ton of debate. But for me, that score is Dragon Ball. And it's just so rich. And when I think of the anime, I think of Kikuchi's score right away. So it's very appreciated.
Okay, so if we'll go to the next slide here, it's time to move on. So,
Time for Power Rangers. That's right.
So, eventually, Dragon Ball Z got popular, and some American people were like, "Yeah, let's do that." So I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Ocean dub, but that was the original Funimation dub with Peter Clemens, who of course is here, and lots of other people, and they had a completely different composer for it. Shuki Levy is who is usually attributed to it. It's not really Shuki Levy. Ron Wasserman is the one who we have heard has done most of those. If you want to really remember what this score is, does anyone remember Rock the Dragon?
Yeah.
So,
Roll the clip.
that, if only you were so lucky. Basically, DBZ comes to English. They almost don't know what the Japanese is. Obviously, we got this weird dialogue. It's very different, and the music shows. It is not going to sound anything like what we just heard. So if we'll go to the next slide here. Obviously, like I said, what he did, anything before that, pretty much, in the original run, just all the way through, there was some legal stuff, and they switched to another guy you may know. But everything before that, all the way to Saiyan Saga, anything that you heard, there in English was done by this guy. So this first clip that we've got here, we'll go to the next slide. What does this guy sound like? What's he into? What is his favorite flavor of ice cream? His favorite flavor of ice cream has like hot sauce on it. I don't know, like he blow-torched it beforehand or something. Like, it's super crazy. It's super intense. I underline one of these words and I italicize another because it's that intense. Everything's super fast. He's a really big fan of like almost faux orchestra, these crazy like wind sections and these like string sections and everything super crazy, and then he's got these synths. But you'll take a look and you'll see what I'm talking about here. I want you to know the cat sound effect was not added in. That is how it aired. No, I don't know why.
Wait, that wasn't drumming?
No, so that was Drummond and Calamus, both of them. Oh, the scream, yeah, that was also there.
That was the
So, you see what I mean? Like, I'm pretty sure the con speakers almost broke for that one. The dude went hard. You hear a lot of these crazy, like, string sounds, and he was a big fan of that, like, weird choral sound where it sounds like a robot's, like, singing along. I don't know. My main point here is, wow, American DBZ did not sound the same at all. And you will notice that that trend will continue forever and ever. Amen. So this next clip here, basically, so something that a lot of people don't know. So once we hit Raccoon, the Funimation dub, the real one that we know with Sean Shyamalan, then it kicks in. But this studio and this composer continue making their own score. I don't know, I guess they were just super into it or something. But they continue making their own score, except guess what? Since they're no longer backed by Funimation, they don't have that sweet, sweet Funimation money. They don't really have the money to make new tracks, and they don't want to pay anyone. So they start taking from other TV shows. I mean, literally, they just take music from the Mega Man show and put it in here. You'll see what I mean.
What did I tell you? But will allowing Cell to become complete be Vegeta's final mistake? Not if Trunks has anything to say about it.
So, like, I'm not joking when I say they just took music from other TV shows and did that. It wasn't just Mega Man, to be fair. It was just a lot of them under that same umbrella because it was all that same studio. But that's pretty much the Ocean Dub's music. There's not a lot to it because he didn't get to do much other than when they started stealing the music and did the rest of the show. What do you think? I know you like Ross Wasserman a lot. What do you think?
Well, it's very important to note. I mean, it's easy to disparage Wasserman and his works, but it's very important to note where anime was in 1996, 1997, because no American kids at home like watched anime overseas. Like Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z have been attempted to be localized multiple times. I think maybe 3 times since 1995, and they've all failed. Like they tried to air Dragon Ball as it was, but it wasn't popular. So the localization, you could almost say the localization was necessary to even appeal to kids in America in 1996, because like otherwise they were afraid people weren't going to watch it. So and this was a common thing to do. Like you could look at Speed Racer and other animes that were localized in like the late 80s and early 90s. This was just a common thing that was done back then. Nowadays, it's entirely different because we have the internet and we can see anime as it's coming out straight out of Japan. So you got to have that different mindset and why this was done. That being said, I still love the music. I don't know. It's my cup of tea.
I think it's cool. I think there's room in Dragon Ball for that sort of experimentation and interpretation when it comes to the soundtrack. I used to be someone who was only into Kikuchi. When I read the manga, I would only think of Kikuchi, but I think sort of what these different composers take away from the material is fascinating in and of itself.
Okay, so that's the Ocean dub. Now, let's move along chronologically. So Ocean's gone, and it's time for a new composer. I don't know if you guys have I might say that I'm a Japanese fan, but I really like Faulkner, so... So Bruce Faulkner rolls around. It's worth noting when I say Bruce Faulkner, it's rough. If we'll go to this next slide here, what did he do? Well, if we'll click through, there's a picture of the beautiful man. Wow, that mustache. And if you click through one more time, he did nothing. Yep. That's actually not entirely true. He did a few tracks, but you would be amazed how few he did. If there were 200 tracks that they composed over the course of Dragon Ball Z, he might have done 6 of them. It's amazing. I have no idea how this happened. The credits for it are fascinating. Who actually did the Faulkner score, as you noted, if we'll click through, Mike Smith, Scott Morgan, Julius Dobosh. They're all 3 here for this convention, and they're putting on a concert. I'm so excited for it. These are the faces of American Dragon Ball and legends in their own rights. If we'll go to this next slide here, you'll see Funimation continued this idea of, okay, Dragon Ball, let's make it American so the kids can like it. Except they did it even more. They adopt this idea of wall-to-wall music, which is coming down from Yen Fukunaga, which was the director of all of this at the time, meaning you're not allowed to not have music. That's against the rules, and why? But you'll see here, this one is what immediately came out of the Faulkner score. It's half mimicking that previous one that we looked at, and half just trying to be even more American. And yeah, you'll see this as well. Let's look. So now Dragon Ball is actually Power Rangers. Okay. But as I said before, all composers, even if it's 3 of them, go through changes. Funimation goes through changes, and things change over time. The next thing that we're going to see here, if we go to the next slide, is basically, over time, Dragon Ball turns out is popular. Who would have thought? And with that, they decide, okay, we don't necessarily have to make this actually Power Rangers. We can settle down a little bit. We get looser restrictions, less of like weird faux guitar stuff as time goes along. And we start to see some more softer music. I don't know, like music I listen to when I'm like stressed out and I need to chill out. This next track is my favorite track of all times in the history of music. Let's take a listen.
You know, I don't get it, Goku. I mean, Gohan's at home studying, and we're out having fun fishing. You must be pretty darn sure we're gonna beat Cell if we're not gonna do anything to prepare for the tournament.
Not at all.
Huh?
You didn't say please.
To tell you the truth, I'm not sure if we have what it takes to beat Cell. I have no idea. Only time will tell.
Oh my god. Like I said, the restrictions on what the Faulkner score could do start to lift. It's less overproduced, and we start to get just some more variants. So if we go to this next slide here. So you remember in the Kikuchi score, I talked about how he uses like motif to establish these kind of themes. Oh man, these guys had hard-ons for that. Oh man. Anyone remember the Vegeta theme with the piano? Yeah, of course. Yeah, the Gohan theme with the piano, I guess. These guys are all about leitmotif, but maybe my favorite thing about the Faulkner score, and the thing that makes it the most unique, is when faced with this wall-to-wall music, they had to get creative because they can only make so many tracks, and if there has to be music constantly playing, it's going to get old. So what they did is they just instead kept making new music, and recycling's a harsh term. They basically kind of remixed these old tracks to give new flavors, and you'll see it kind of plays in that theme idea, but it's just the detail that they poured into this. We'll play this first clip real quick.
I can't let those monsters kill them. Most of them can't be wished back to life. They'll just be gone. They'll all be gone.
Your energy is beginning to swell. That's good. Now take your anger and feed off of it. Use it to unleash your power before it's too late for your friend. Just take a look out there. No one but Vegeta and Trunks can still defend themselves. Not even your father. He too will die.
So there's that. I love it a lot. So, you heard that melody, that bump, 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 bump. So, this next clip here is when Gohan returns to Earth, to just utterly decimate Boo. Right?
Now explain to me exactly what the outfit looked like. What color was it?
How about the one he was just wearing? That's the one. Thanks, Kabito.
Anything for a savior. We anticipate great things to come from you, Gohan. Please don't leave us and the world disappointed.
No way. I'm not gonna start disappointing people now.
Just, you know, clean the gap on this fight.
Alright, this is it.
So that was great, right? Here is the thing that makes the Faulkner score unique. That track you heard. So it's similar to the first one we heard, but different. It's mixed different. You have these weird, like, water droplet sounds, and everything except the last part is completely different. That was only used in that scene. They made it just for that. It was never used again, and they do that like a million times. The amount of detail, whether you like Faulkner or not, is hard to argue. I mean, they poured so much into this. Every little scene, they just tried to fight having to do music constantly, and some pretty cool things came out of it. If we look at this next slide here. So, we approach the end of the Faulkner score, and the Boo arc rolls around. And it's time they add a third composer who was on that list. His name is Julius Dobolsh. He goes by Forgotten Future, which is a really cool name. He came in to do a bunch of the stuff for the Boo arc, and it sounded even more different than it did before. Everything is super spacey and weird, and instead of these like synth sounds, he brings in these like cellos and these like brass sections, and suddenly it's like a big movie. And you'll see here one of my favorite tracks of all times. It is almost completely different than anything that we saw in the Faulkner score before. Different, and man, I think it sounds great. So that's pretty much like the whole Faulkner score in a nutshell. You see, we go through some changes. If we'll go to the next slide here, there wasn't like much else that happened. If we'll play this clip with this.
Yes, to go even further beyond.
All right, that's enough of that. Yeah, that's, if I played the rest of that clip, that would be the rest of the show. So, that's pretty much it. Like I said, you see that first clip, you compare it with the Julius clip, completely different, everyone changes. So, the next composer that we've got here, Nathan Johnson. Now let me take you further through the chronological order here. So, DBZ ends in America, and they realize that they want to release stuff on DVDs. Except, wait a second, if you'll recall the Wasserman score, they are no longer friends with them and can't use that score. And in between, when Z ended and GT came around, Bruce Faulkner was kind of a butthole, and they didn't like him either. So they were no longer friends. So man, we gotta do a new composer, right? Because we want to do these first the Saiyan arc for the DVDs, and they were too afraid to use the Japanese music for some reason. And this is a real story here. Nathan Johnson. This guy looks like a lawyer, right? Yeah. He is. That is his job. It was his job when he got hired, and it is his job now. Actually, he's running for office right now. Yeah, he's running for senator.
No way.
Go out and vote. Yeah. Basically, the real story. This guy bought a house, or was renting a house from one of the producers for Dragon Ball. And the producer was coming along to check along the property. He's like, "Oh yeah, you got a piano?" He's like, "Yeah, I play some." He's like, "Hey, you should do the music." And he's like, "Okay." That was it. That was the whole thing. This isn't a joke. That's what happened. Just let that sink in for a second. Oh, it turns out he wasn't that bad, actually. If we go to the next slide here, what did he do? Like I said, if we click through, he did just the revival, the first Saiyan arc, the Dragon Ball Uncut was what they called it before it was the Orange Prince. So if we go to this first clip here, you'll see basically he was instructed to kind of mimic Wasserman a little bit, not entirely, but they kind of wanted some sort of tonal consistency. So when they made the switch over to the Faulkner part, it didn't sound incredibly different. So we'll listen to this real quick. So, again, you see a lot of the same things, these weird synth sounds. Again, it sounds like, I don't know, it sounds like a Game Boy video game. I don't know. It wasn't terrible, but he was a lawyer, so give him a break. But what you'll see here, again, we go back to this evolution. Over time, this guy starts to get his footing, and he discovers these things like wind instruments and like chimes and any real instruments. And over time, he starts to completely change. Not only did he do the Say arc, but they had him do 2 or 3 movies, the English versions of those. And this next clip we'll see here is from Wrath of the Dragon, which, man, his score for that is actually really great. And you will see, I mean, this baby boy grew into a baby man right here. It's going to sound very different, full orchestral. Sounds like a movie. I mean, it is a movie, but you get the idea. Let's listen. Those two are the same person. You listen to them. If anyone says they could have guessed that that's the same person, they're lying to me, because that's 2 completely things. One is Game Boy music, and the other one is like, I don't know, Marvel or something. So that's pretty much it. Again, he didn't do too much because he just had the Saiyan arc, but wow, the transformation is pretty incredible. What do you think?
I think Johnson's score isn't that bad. It's definitely not my favorite score, but it's got its moments. It's like it's sprinkled about with these really great little tracks. Like his recap to like the recap theme for each episode is borderline like Faulkner quality, if you ask me. But I don't feel like in his 2 seasons of Uncut DBZ he really grew into like a style. It was very freeform a lot, and it was a lot of noise to fill up some scenes. But he has his fans, and his music has touched people.
So, if we'll move along, the next composer. So Kai, right? Kai gets announced. It's Dragon Ball, but shorter.
I love that.
And this baby boy comes along. He's super cute. Doesn't even have facial hair. He's actually been with Dragon Ball for like 1,000,000 years. Any game that came out pretty much that had music for it before, like Budokai Tenkaichi 3, this guy did. And so Kai comes around. Kikuchi is retired, I guess, for the Japanese, and so they're like, well, you've been doing Dragon Ball. Let's go ahead and do it. And he does it, and boy, does he do it. If we'll go to this next slide here. Again, he did Kai, the games, etc. Another thing worth noting, he did do pretty much any of the Japanese insert songs. Most of them, at least, he composed. Oh, man.
Battle Point Unlimited.
Yep, Battle Point Unlimited. Oh, man, what a guy. So he had a history. So if we'll go to this first clip here, again, you'll notice I copied that slide from the Johnson, because it sounds very similar. You're going to see a lot of the same like cellos. Looks amazing, sounds amazing. He also was pretty fantastic at Slice of Life. We'll listen to this real quick. It sounds like
Hi, Puma's mom.
So, here's where we get to the awkward part, right? So, eventually we have to cut this guy because we noticed something. you get the idea. They're the exact same. What he basically gets copied for is copying. He literally took the exact tracks and just did them again. Plagiarist. Japan was very embarrassed and kicked him out.
Never allowed to make music again, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, no. I mean, I have no idea where he went. I'm pretty sure he's dead. So, GT comes along. We get this guy named Takanaga. We're kind of getting to the filler stuff, so I can just kind of fly through this. Takanaga comes around. He does GT. There's not a lot to say about him. So if we'll go to this next clip, here's my take on Takanaga, right? So he heard the opening. Let's play this real quick. Okay, so there's the intro, right?
Good song.
So, first of all, that song's amazing. Second of all, so he hears that, and he just does that like 100 times. That's
Yes, it's finally beginning now.
So that's that. Honestly, I don't have much more to say on him. He was kind of bland, honestly. Most of his stuff sounded kind of corny. I mean, it's great. He's not dumb or anything, but there's just not much to say. He really did do like 15 versions of the opening. And that's pretty much it.
And then everything else was like Hitori Janai.
Yeah, pretty much. So then we move along. So America wants to do GT, and they decide they want to make it American, except now it's the 90s, and American isn't rock, it's rap. And so if we'll go here, what did he do? Well, so here's what's associated with him. Please skip it. Okay. And that is my whole presentation on that guy. I don't want to talk about him.
So did he write the rap also?
No, he actually did not write the rap, but that's as far as I got into GT, so whatever. Alright, so we're coming to a close, and it's time for the last composer that's associated with Dragon Ball. Like I said, Super rolls around, it's time to do it. And this guy comes around, let's roll the clip real quick. Basically, he comes around, it's time for Battle of Gods, he gets hired, and he makes his mark. Let's listen.
I just want to hear you say that you give up. Huh?
Well, I do. I do give up. I've given all I've got, Lord Beerus, but there's still no way I can beat you. I mean, you're the strongest in the whole universe.
Well, I'm happy to see you're finally realizing the full terror of Beerus the Destroyer. But
I love that track so much. Anyways, so, very, very different. He makes his mark, but we run into a problem. So, Super gets announced, then it's time for the Boo arc of Kai. So he's the resident composer, so they say do that, except because of this huge success of Battle of Gods, I guess Toei decides it's time to modernize Dragon Ball and make it new and cool for the kids. And I guess their view of new and cool for the kids is whatever this clip is.
Ta-da! Hey, guys! Hey, you made it!
Goku.
Awesome! Wow, it's been so long I hardly recognize you. So,
It's like,
Yeah. So you get where I'm coming from here. They try and they try and modernize, and that's kind of what he's dealing with here. You heard his work on Battle of Gods. That's not really who this guy is. This guy is like classical, and he's being put in this weird position, and nobody liked him, and I don't blame them. But eventually, over time, Super rolls around, and slowly, kind of like the Faulkner boys, he kind of gets his footing and is allowed to do a little bit more, and kind of goes a little bit back to his roots. We'll see here. big, orchestral, beautiful. Oh my god. Oh my god, so good. And yeah, that's pretty much the whole thing. We'll go to this next clip here and you'll see what And that's all I want to play of that. That's Omen of Victory.
No, it's not.
It's actually not. Hey, I was getting to that. That's not Omen of Victory, if any of you thought that. That is Turning the Tables. Both of them are horrible. Again, you see, this directorial influence is just raining down from him, ruining his life, and he can't do anything that he wants until the Black Arc. He gets his footing, and he gets to do a little bit more of Goku Black, and then he does this. Beautiful. Oh my god. Again, we talk about this evolution. I'm just about out of time, so we're going to wrap this up here. We talk about the evolution. It's time for the Tournament of Power. And I guess he got bored of doing his regular thing, so he decided to like take a tour into jazz and a little bit of like this electric guitar stuff. And then we get a lot of this music. Obviously, we know Ultimate Battle. That wasn't him. Don't freak out. We know the theme that's associated with Ultra Instinct, which is beautiful and amazing. He did that. But this is what clip I'm going to show for the Tournament of Power because I love it so much.
真面目にやるとするか。では、私は他の仲間の援護へ。あの獲物はあたりが仕留める。ご無礼を隠させます。
So, that's pretty much every single person that made music for the Dragon Ball anime. They're all very different. They all went through these crazy changes. You probably hate some of them. I do. I don't like Mark Milza. I hope you enjoyed it. We went a little bit over just like AJ. Hope you learned something and learned maybe to not dislike Faulkner or Sumitomo because everybody likes to do that. If anybody has questions, I've got 15 minutes until I have to vacate the premise, so just come up and say hi. They'll kick me out after that. And thanks for coming.